Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, September 9th, 2025, and our friend Carl Wilkerson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Good to be with you, Nima, even if on this adumbrated method of my cell phone.
Yeah. Please subscribe and hit the like button to help us to somehow to reach more people. Larry, we had an attack on Doha. It's not Syria. It's not Iran. Not even, I would argue, Turkey. It's in the heart of the one of the main allies of the United States. What has happened? What's your understanding of what has happened?
My understanding is that Bibi Netanyahu is doing precisely what Bibi Netanyahu is want to do. He will do anything to fulfill his wishes, his will, no matter how bloodthirsty, no matter how violative of international law, no matter how violative of his big daddy in Washington and their concerns, he will do it. And he's saying that he will do it. And as I understand it, he said he did it. And he said that he didn't talk to us to do it. I understand the government is saying other things, but that's Bibi. That's Bibi. That's who we have to deal with now. Man who walked out of his own trial, walked out of the courtroom, I'm told, or didn't go at all, one or the other, because of people who've been killed on the bus, I guess. He'll throw out any excuse. He doesn't give a damn about those people. He just doesn't want to go into the trial.
They said Israeli media says that they got the green light from the United States before attacking Doha.
Right. And he said they didn't. So, he's attesting to his ability to do anything despite any big daddy in Washington. And the Israeli government is trying to cover over that a little bit because they know there is a big daddy in Washington. And they know that big daddy in Washington has a very close relationship with Qatar and a very sensitive air base there. And, but we won't do anything. We won't do anything. Bibi is our man. Bibi is doing our wishes, and we won't do anything.
What was the point of killing the Hamas leaders? Do they really believe that that would change the nature of or the identity of negotiations?
The only reason I can fathom, and it goes in line with other occurrences of a similar nature, is that he didn't want any kind of settlement. He didn't want any kind of negotiation to succeed. And so he made sure it wouldn't.
No. It seems that Donald Trump is somehow happy with that. He doesn't do anything. You don't hear Donald Trump coming out and condemning anything. And what is in Netanyahu that Donald Trump that so much resonates with Donald Trump?
I'm not sure that Donald Trump, first of all, well, let me just back up. There are several answers to that question, none of which I know with authority. But the first answer I would give is Donald Trump doesn't care. The second answer I would give is that Donald Trump is not in full possession of his senses right now. And I'm hearing rumors to that effect from all manner of different people. Whether it's some of the photographs they've seen of him recently or actually had contact with him and remarked on how uncontrolled he was with regard to his language and his sentences and his speech in general. A third reason, this seems to be his way of dealing with Bibi, to let him go as far as Bibi wants to go, and then only if it turns out to be a repercussion that's politically damaging to him, and that's his judgment. That's always his judgment, and it's not a good judgment. Will he rein him in or do anything adverse towards his wishes? So I don't know which one of those reasons it is, or a fourth or a fifth reason. I just don't know. But I do know the track record, and the track record is Bibi can do anything he wants to. Nima, if he sent a missile toward Moscow, or he sent a missile toward Beijing, if he could do that, or if he sent one towards any other capital in the world for that matter, Donald Trump would not reprimand him. I don't think so. He might talk to him, but I don't think he'd reprimand him. And Bibi would have an excuse. this is the relationship. And this is the relationship that I've described as the dog doing our damage in the Levant for us, and we dare not interrupt that process. And I'll give you a really an example that's tearing me up right now. I mean, in terms of thinking about it, because for a while here, I have been a rather strident advocate for this UN General Assembly United for Peace alternative. And I understand the details. I understand it's been done before. I understand that it can be done again, and it can be done without the Security Council and so forth. But here's the dilemma. While all of us, I think, who have a heart would like to see the killing start and the starvation stop, what are you going to do if Mahmoud Abbas is the requesting authority, and it has to be a head of state, and you know that Mahmoud Abbas is only better than Hamas in the fact that he's not actually killing people right now or engaged in a combat. In other words, Mahmoud Abbas is not someone I'd want to see lead a Palestinian state if there were a two-state solution. So you enfranchise him, as it were, if you let him be the signatory on the request as the head of state, all Palestine. That's your first problem. You could get around that problem at least if it stopped the killing and the starvation. But the second problem you have a hard time getting around. He would acquiesce in, and we would insist on with him, that the force coming in to enforce the peace would be UN Security Council members, and it would be particular members: France, Britain, the United States, former colonial powers, I would say. And the only thing that would happen with that is a prolongation, stop the killing, enforce the peace, as it were. But then it would just be a prolongation of what's happening right now on a lower burner and what was happening before October the 7th on that same lower burner. In other words, we'd be going towards the same end. There would not be two states. They would continue to settle the West Bank and continue to call it Judea and Samaria. They would continue what they're doing in Lebanon, continue what they're doing in Syria. There would be no stop. We just go slowly toward the result rather than rapidly and bestially toward the result. So the only way you're going to get this UNGA initiative, UFP initiative, to work is if you could find someone else to sign the letter. I don't think that's possible. I don't think the UN could back up that much in terms of law and legalities and do that. Let Abbas go ahead and do it. But the peace enforcement mechanism on the ground has to be non-Western. The peace enforcement mechanism should be led by China, at least 40,000 troops. And then it should be filled in with Turks, Pakistanis, whatever, people who don't necessarily have a direct dog in the fight, people who will actually try to keep the peace, actually enforce the peace, and I would say fulfill the other UN Security Council resolutions, which means, as Richard Haas has suggested, and then stopped in terms of how he would do it, typical Richard, getting the settlers out of the West Bank, getting the settlers out of East Jerusalem, getting the settlers out of everywhere where they don't belong in accordance with UN Security Council resolutions, getting them out. I don't care how you get them out, plop them down in Israel proper and say, now there, you go make yourself a home. That's the only way to ensure that the Palestinians do indeed have a future and not a return to this creeping destruction of them, which was sped up on October the 7th. We just break it back a little bit, but it would keep on going inexorably towards the same end product, because that's what the empire wants. So you have to intervene with some power that has the ability, the capacity, the money, the capability, and the desire to stand up to the empire. And there's only one country that could lead that operation in my mind, and that's China.
Larry, here is what White House said about the attack on Doha, on Qatar.
Strike in Doha. How much time or how much of a heads up did the U.S. get, and does the president support the strike?
Sure. Well, I have a statement to read for all of you with respect to the Israeli strike in Doha, and here it is. This morning, the Trump administration was notified by the United States military that as Israel was attacking Hamas, which very unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar. Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal. President Trump immediately directed Special Envoy Witkoff to inform the Qataris of the impending attack, which he did. The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States and feels very badly about the location of this attack. President Trump wants all of the hostages in Gaza and the bodies of the dead released, and this war to end now. President Trump also spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu after the attack. The Prime Minister told President Trump that he wants to make peace, and quickly. President Trump believes this unfortunate incident could serve as an opportunity for peace. The president also spoke to the Emir and Prime Minister of Qatar and thanked them for their support and friendship to our country. He assured them that such a thing will not happen again on their soil.
How
Hmm.
how that, because they couldn't, it seems that, I don't know if you heard about the outcome of the attack. It doesn't seem that they killed the people they wanted to kill, which was the leader of Hamas. He's alive. His son was killed, by the way, during the attack.
His
And
son?
his son was killed, yeah. And it doesn't seem that these people that were killed were that much decisive when it comes to negotiations with the West, with Israelis.
The statement was an artful statement. It was the best she could do, the best all the people beavering away in the trenches could do to prepare her, I think, with one or two exceptions, like the remarks made by President Trump, which are just nonsense. He doesn't care at all. But the statement was balanced, and it was as good as they could probably do to cover over what is really a tragic event for both U.S. Israel relations and the situation in Gaza. The reason they did it, I'm quite confident, was because Bibi Netanyahu does not want a negotiated settlement, period. And he had intelligence telling him that they were getting close, or they were getting close to something, and that didn't please him. And so he wanted it stopped, and that was the best way to stop it. We pasted over that completely, of course, because our desire is not to tell the truth in any of this. But the one sentence in there that might turn out to be a bright light in an otherwise dismal picture is Trump's statement. I think I heard it right. I'd have to listen to it again, but his statement that this war must stop. That's emphatic, and if it is meant that way to be emphatic, then it means he's getting irritated. He's getting angry at the process of not being able to conclude some sort of ceasefire and an ultimate stop to the war. I think he's beginning to understand how much it is degrading the political position of the political party he represents, and even more so, and more important to him, his own. And he's at wit's end probably as to how to change that and to change it quickly, other than stopping this conflict and appearing to stop it on a positive basis, hostages returned and such. Netanyahu's not. Netanyahu's not. And what that begs the question of is, does Donald Trump realize that Bibi's going to take him into war with Iran? Does he even have an inkling that Bibi is planning on taking him into war with Iran? And the reason I say that so categorically is because he has no national security advisor. His national security advisor, such as he is the Secretary of State, who is now concentrated on doing everything he possibly can to screw every country he possibly can in Latin America, particularly Venezuela. He's not paying any attention to the rest of the tapestry, the sheet of music upon which the United States is violating so many people's rights around the world. So no one's telling Donald Trump that you may end this conflict. You may have some superb negotiations with Witkoff and Doha, although they've just been interrupted majorly. It's not going to make any difference because you're going to war in Iran. Bibi is intent on taking you into war in Iran because Bibi cannot handle Iran when he reattacks them. And he knows that. So he's reattacking them only to bring you in because he thinks you can. Now, this national security advisor should be consulting with Secretary Hegseth, and they should jointly tell the president, when this happens, you are in for a penny, in for a pound, and the pound is going to cost you trillions of dollars, lots of blood, and you won't be the winner when it's over or looks like it has to end and does end. No one's telling him that. Not a soul in the government is telling him that. And he doesn't read other people. He doesn't read the papers like Trita Parsi wrote, for example. He doesn't have anyone telling him the truth. And that's a very dangerous situation for a man who's already really handicapped in dealing with the truth, especially national security truth. And he doesn't even get that. So I don't know where we're headed, Nima. I simply do not know where we're headed. In the Levant, in Ukraine, in the greater tapestry of warfare that's going on out there that some of us don't even know anything about. And I don't know what's going on with regard to this new defense paper, which essentially re-articulates our strategic posture as one focused first and foremost on the Western Hemisphere and the homeland. That's a complete reversal of the previous one, although it still includes a focus on China and Russia and all the other ingredients. But all the other ingredients, other than that one focusing on China and Russia, all the other ingredients are tailored into that primary focus, the Western Hemisphere and the homeland.
Here is what the Qatari foreign minister said. He denies that they were notified before the Israeli attack, stating that the contact with the U.S. officials occurred at the moment of the explosions. You know, what does that mean, Larry, geopolitically, when you go and hit some targets and you let Israel attack Qatar, which was one of the main allies of the United States? And what is the outcome of that for other countries in the region?
Well, I suspect this is something like the Japanese and the attack on Pearl Harbor that commenced our participation in World War II. The Japanese were trying desperately. It doesn't really ameliorate their perfidy much, but they were trying desperately to get the signal to Roosevelt before the attack occurred that they were breaking off relations, because we knew that signal meant war. And that would have been a warning. So it would have been a short-lived warning maybe, but it would have been a warning. They failed. They didn't get it through on time. I suspect that some of that might have been going on with this one too, on a lesser scale, of course, but it just didn't get there in time. It was intended to get there, a few minutes, half an hour, whatever could be achieved ahead of the strike. That might have been an Israeli operational mistake too. They might have been too early, or they might have been, not exactly doing what they said they were going to do. But I suspect it was miscoordination more than anything else. But that doesn't obviate the fact that you just asked that question. What does this do when you hit an ally like that, unexpecting even, even if it had been a half an hour earlier. I mean, what would the emir have said had he been informed that we were going to bomb Hamas in his building in his country? I'm not sure. I'm not sure he would have gone, okay, fine, let them do it. I probably would have picked up the phone and called Washington and said, "Are you kidding me?" I don't know though. Yeah, it's a diplomatic faux pas of the first order, but more importantly than that, if I were Qatar, I would respond forcefully. I would issue at least a demarche to the United States through the ambassador there, and I would even warn him that your facilities in my country are subject to removal at any time, or even remove them.
Yeah.
They're not going to do that. They count on those facilities too much, not just for the reasons that we usually enumerate, the U.S. presence in the region and the U.S. security shield and that, but because there's money involved, and there's a lot of money involved. There are people who were talking this morning about, Qatar should take its airplane back. The 747, they should take their airplane back. Well, okay, what does that prove? That doesn't prove anything. It's not a substantial harm either way. They should do something more forcefully if they're going to do something that really shows off their anger and their intention to go and maybe look at things from a different perspective. But they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. I hate to say this, Neiman, but the Arab states have shown their fecklessness completely in the last 2 years or so. Since October the 7th, they are feckless. They are basically feckless. Would Saudi Arabia, for example, have been able to do something? Could Saudi Arabia do something today? Yes, it could. It could pick up the phone, Mohammed bin Salman, I assume, and call Ankara and get Erdogan on the phone and say, you have enormous, enormous economic problems right now. So I don't blame you for not putting major forces into the Levant and checking that bastard named Bibi Netanyahu. What I will offer you is complete solvency for your economic situation, at least for the short term. What do you need? Do you need 200 billion? Do you need 300 billion? What do you need? We are buying you to do what you should have done long ago. Now, that would be a powerful move by Riyadh. And I'm not so sure they couldn't bring it off. Probably with the other Arab capitals and maybe even Pakistan, they could bring it off in both material necessary and in funds necessary. But who's thinking that way? I mean, they don't think that way. They think about covering their rear ends 24/7 and making more money. Meanwhile, I think I heard an analysis today that's pretty spot on. There are over 200,000 men, women, and children, 50% of them probably women and children, maybe another 10 to 20% old people under the rubble in Gaza proper. No telling how many in the West Bank or in East Jerusalem, but in Gaza proper, that's how many people. It's somewhere between 200 and 300,000 people. Now, the Washington Post says, prove it, Larry, prove it, Larry. And I say to them, get off your ass and go to Gaza with a shovel. New York Times says the same thing. Ralph Nader just sent a letter to both newspapers telling them, you're lying. The casualties are much larger. And if you weren't brain dead, you'd know they are. But no, we're going along with the government. Our media is going along with the government. There is no one at the New York Times or the Washington Post who has any courage whatsoever to report the situation in Gaza the way it should be reported. It's that simple.
You mentioned Turkey. I think Turkey somehow, the role of Turkey is tricky, and they're targeting Israel as they attack Doha. They're hitting some targets in Syria. And we know that these targets are related to Turkey and their equipment, or the people who are working with the government in Turkey. These attacks somehow can be understood as the attack on Turkey and their movement in Syria. How do you feel the possibility of an escalation between Turkey and Israel?
I missed the first part of your comments. Did you say that the Turks were attacking forces in Syria?
No, the Turks, these equipment that they're attacking, these regions that they're attacking, they're hitting, are related to the Turkish government and the people who are somehow coordinating with them,
Ah,
or the equipments of the equipment of Turkey are there.
okay. Well, again, Erdogan is in economic troubles, and his government is in economic troubles, in jeopardy. I I don't see him making any forceful moves in that respect. If he concludes politically, the way leaders often do, that the use of force might have some bolstering effect to his sinking political situation, despite the economic difficulties that are really primarily the reasons for that, then maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he would take action if he thinks it would bolster his political chances, or even bolster his current political position. Then he might take action. But I don't expect it. I mean, he's led me to believe that he's all mouth and no action. And I got to say the same thing about his foreign minister, really. I mean, I've followed his foreign minister more closely than I have him now for the last 6 months or so. And he speaks well, but nothing ever follows. Nothing of consequence ever follows.
Yeah.
I
Here
think the
is
Arabs and the Turks are trying to outdo one another in terms of fecklessness.
here is Larry Speaker Johnson. He claims that he knows nothing about Israeli strike on Doha.
Probably true.
As we were all driving and walking in here, Israel struck Qatar to take out Hamas leadership. I'm curious if any of you think that whoever survives there should be evicted from Qatar.
I don't know anything about that development. That's news to me. I've been a little busy the last couple hours, but we'll have to see how that plays out. I mean, look. I was in Israel myself a few weeks ago in early August. It's a very dangerous time there, and they have enemies encamped around them, and they're trying to bring that to a peace as well. But Hamas, by anybody who looks at this reasonably, and in my view, this is my personal view, that Hamas has to be eradicated. You've got to remove that threat on the immediate border, frankly, within the bounds of Israel.
Yeah.
Now, Mike Johnson can't say what he really feels, of course. He would like to. He would like to, just as Ted Cruz in his interview with Tucker Carlson got a little bit, off base there and told Tucker what prompted his national security decision making. Genesis in the Old Testament. What Mike Johnson wanted to say there, and would have said had it not been not too conducive to his political position to do so, is I don't give a damn what Netanyahu did. We're looking for the end times. We're looking for the rapture. And the Bible says that Israel has to be making greater Israel into reality for Christ to come back to the earth. That's a prerequisite. And as long as Bibi is doing that, I am for him. He can attack Riyadh. He can attack Doha. He can attack any capital in that region he wants to. Hell, he can attack Washington as long as he's fulfilling the biblical prophecy of Armageddon, the end times, the rapture, and Christ coming back. That's Mike Johnson. I know that's hard for you to believe down there in insane Brazil, but that's where we are in this country. He's got 50 million Americans behind him in that regard. Dispensationalist, fundamentalist, pick your term. He's got them behind him. And most of them are in the Republican Party. Not all, but most are.
Larry, when it comes to, I think these attacks somehow are some sort of signs for the government in Lebanon to understand that the Israeli government, they cannot trust them. They cannot believe in what they're talking about. Because after all, without Hezbollah, look at Lebanon, without Hezbollah, they can go on the ground and capture all of Lebanon, in my opinion.
Right?
When
Done
they
that
don't care
before.
about Qatar, they don't care about Doha. Why they should care about Lebanon?
Nope. Got that border right there, and they've done it before. What, 3 times, 4 times? One time stayed around about 10 years. About time for them to take it and take it all and stay for the rest of eternity, or until the end times come. Of course, the people like Netanyahu, they're not religious at all. They don't believe that. They're just greedy and bloodthirsty and want a greater Israel. And Lebanon could be part of that. Lebanon, Beirut has reason to be worried. And though the United States has from time to time shown that that would be a step too far for the empire, we haven't really acquiesced in all of Lebanon falling under Jerusalem's sway. We would probably acquiesce in it were it to be a fait accompli. And Bibi would make it a fait accompli, or he would try to. I'm not so sure the rest of the world would watch Lebanon go under Jerusalem's sway without doing something. And when I say the rest of the world, I'm thinking of people like Putin, and I'm thinking of people like Xi Jinping, and I'm thinking of people like in Tehran.
It seems that this foreign minister of Iran in Cairo, they've reached some sort of agreement with Grossi, the head of IAEA, that they want to do something with. I don't know what is the main goal, main objective of this agreement, but positive signs are coming out of Cairo. After all, do you think with this agreement, are we still having the threat of a new war, between a new attack on Iran?
I don't know what the agreement says. I can imagine that if the Iranians have once again caved to the empire and their own desire to resume some sort of negotiations, that they feel like the IAEA is critical to that. And so they have to work out some kind of arrangement where they minimize the danger, and there is a danger to them from the IAEA, infiltrated as it is by Mossad and CIA. And at the same time, minimizing that danger, go ahead with an acceptance of the IAEA being a part of the process of negotiating. That's all I can think. And I wish them luck. They will just be bamboozled again, in my view.
By the way, the deal must be approved by the Iran's parliament, because
Good.
the government is not.
Good.
Yeah, it's
The
not that.
the Iranian parliament will not approve it.
Actually, I'm totally positive in what you've said, what you've just said, and there were a lot of critics in the Iranian parliament against the attitude of the government and the way that they're trying to talk with the West. But the only option, Larry, after all, I think the only option for what can they do? Russia tried to negotiate, Iran tries to negotiate, everybody tries to negotiate, because they see something big happening. If they don't do that, in the eyes of the whole world, they say they don't want to talk. They don't want, because the media is in the hand of these people, after all, and everything is about the media and how they picture, how they try to shape the situation. And I don't see the government in Iran, in Russia, in China be, somehow be negative about more negotiations, more talks. That's why they're trying to do their best in that direction.
Nima, I don't know why any country in the world, even an ally and friend, would think that it could enter negotiations with the United States of America, or for that matter, with Israel, and expect to be anything but lied to, cheated on, and ultimately hurt in whatever fashion the hurt came, because that's what we do now. We don't do negotiations. We don't do diplomacy in good faith. We just don't. I would be extremely worried for Iran, and they should be extremely worried for themselves should they get back into some kind of negotiation that featured the IAEA and featured the usual characters discussing the usual things. And I don't know if this was prompted by the possibility of the snapback sanctions, but I don't think that's a reason to do what you were just purporting they might be doing, getting ready to try to re-enter negotiations. I don't see that Iran has really much viable opportunity other than to go its route on its own. That's not going to be on its own in that sense, because Putin has made some pretty strong statements. I think the message coming out of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's meetings was a solid message of support. I think Iran does have some friends in the world. It does have powerful friends in the world. And it does have the capability itself, as we've said many times, I think, to stand on its own with Israel, maybe even to defeat Israel. I'm not saying I'm hoping that that comes about, but I'm almost sure that it is going to come about. Maybe that's what's propelling them into trying in some way to reestablish negotiations, but I think it's a mistake. And I think if they haven't learned that from the past mistakes, then they're beyond help. Now, I'm not in favor of a war. I certainly am not in favor of a war in any way to avoid it in a less than duplicitous fashion, so that each side, and this should always be the purpose of diplomacy, each side comes out of it at least as well as could be expected, and with some gains that more or less outweigh the losses. That's what diplomacy is supposed to be. You have win-win. You don't have lose-lose, or at worst, you have nobody wins, nobody loses, nobody wins, nobody loses, period. That's not what we do. And if they haven't learned that, I feel for them.
Here is what Pete Hegseth said about the Department of War.
About his Department of War?
And we won World War II, not with the Department of Defense, but with a War Department.
We're focusing our military on its core mission, crushing America's adversaries.
Yeah.
Crushing America's adversaries, like those, 11, 12 people in that boat with the 3 outboards on it headed for Trinidad. Crushing America's enemies. Come on, man. You can find better rhetoric than that, I'm sure. Even in a comic book, you can find better rhetoric than that. And let's just, Colin Powell used to say this all the time. And other generals that I knew too, that I trusted and had some faith in, they would use the metaphor of the chief of staff of the Army, or the CNO, the chief of naval operations. They say, you know why the chief of staff of the Army, or the chief of naval operations, you know why when they come in and they're about at the 2-year point of a 4-year tour or whatever, you know why they change the uniform? Yeah. They change the uniform because that's the only thing they can do that will actually happen. In other words, they've been so ineffective as a real leader in matters that really count. They reach out and change the uniform, or change something like that they can change. They have the power to do. They have the mandate to do, in order to look like they're accomplishing something. That's what changing the name of the Defense Department is. That's precisely what it is. He can't manage the department. He can't solve the budget problem. He's making it worse. He can't solve the problem of too many defense contractors producing too lousy products. He can't solve any of the real problems that plague the Defense Department. And by extension, because half the federal budget goes to them, the country. So what does he do? He changes names.
Do you find any point on the map that you feel that Donald Trump is doing something positive?
I find none whatsoever. In fact, we had a discussion of that amongst ourselves at the Eisenhower Media Network. And some people wanted to say that he's at least anti-war. I really didn't take it. He blew a boat out of the water. That's not war. That's an international transgression. That's a war crime. But that's not someone who is opposed to war or the use of the implements of war. And he's certainly not done anything to stop the battle in Ukraine. Putin's doing all of that through force of arms. He's not doing anything whatsoever to stop the bloodiest battle on the face of the earth in Gaza, on the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, in Syria, in Lebanon. Nothing. He's doing nothing to stop that. So we came to the conclusion, or at least I certainly thought we came to the conclusion, he's not even anti-war. And that was a lie, too. There's still people who think, okay, Trump is just, he's all the things that you say he is, but at least he's not Joe Biden. At least he doesn't want war. He wants peace. Do you see that, Nima?
No sign to me. No sign. Who has the escalation dominance in Ukraine? Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin?
Vladimir Putin, unquestionably. You've got people whispering all around the periphery of Ukraine right now about what they're going to do with their lives now that they know it's lost. You've got people in Ukraine who are already unassing Ukraine, as we used to say in the army. They're leaving. You've got people in Poland who are really becoming far more circumspect about what they say and do. You've got people in Poland, for example, who are now objecting to the fact that, can you believe this? The Ukrainians in Poland are mounting a movement to ensure that the Polish government doesn't cheat them and not teach Ukrainian language in the high schools. What a thing to insist. I mean, wait until you've been there for a while and enter the political process, and then maybe you can influence the curriculum in Polish high schools. Don't go out on the street and demand that Ukrainian be taught in Polish high schools. Want to piss the Poles off? I mean, it's falling apart, Nima. It's falling apart, and I don't give the Ukrainian leadership, I hate to even call it that, much longer in terms of survival. It should not have come to this. It should have ended in Istanbul. It should have ended with the special military operation not even getting started well. It should have ended right there. Ukraine would still have a lot. Russia would have accomplished what it wanted to accomplish with regard to its security. And granted, the Ukrainians would have not left that alone as long as the Nazis were still there, the Azimov people and such. They would have been, testing it every day. But at least we would have had an end to the hostilities that we now have seen kill somewhere close, I'm told now, to 1.7 million. The vast majority on the Ukrainian side, probably like 1.4 million on the Ukrainian side. We wouldn't have had any of that. And we wouldn't have this sort of situation now where we have governments collapsing in Europe, Germany's, France, and Britain's just hanging on by the skin of their teeth, and other governments are going to follow. We even had the Finnish president the other day making a pretty sound statement about he didn't go too far, but he went far enough to tell me that he's smelling the roses. He knows things aren't too copacetic. And we've got in addition to that, because of the pressures created by Ukraine, we've got developing all along that arc of crisis I was talking about. Again, from the Arctic all the way down to Azerbaijan and Armenia, and even all the way down to Iran, of course. We've got this crisis situation that it could break out at any time. If you knew what I've heard, I can't talk about it with any specificity, but what we're doing now around the periphery of Russia with our military forces, even though this national defense strategy seems to say that we're going to concentrate on the Western Hemisphere and on the homeland, maybe part of concentrating on the Western Hemisphere is flying around Murmansk in very dangerous ways, flying patrols around around Russia's periphery in very, very dangerous places, like the Sea of Okhotsk or the Kamchatka Peninsula, or off Murmansk, as I said, or even some places in the GIUK Gap where we're trailing Soviet, Russian submarines and such, like we used to. It's not a situation that is conducive to good relations between the U.S. and Russia, even if Ukraine weren't there. Now, you can say Ukraine prompted some of this. I don't think so. I think we'd be doing it anyway because we have got this focus. And by the way, the new strategy doesn't take the focus off Russia and China. It names them in the strategy. It just says overall, the strategy is going to be focused on the Western Hemisphere and the homeland. But down in the context, it talks about Russia and China and other things like that. It talks about the nuclear deterrent, talks about the money they're going to spend on that. So it's not that much of a change, except in the broad scope of telling other people in the world that the United States is to a certain extent retrenching. And the most important place that's registering right now is Japan and Korea and Europe. And when it comes out fully, I'm sure it will register more broadly.
We had the European representatives in Washington talking with the Trump administration in order to put pressure on Russia, because after all, we know Europe is one of the main importers of Russian oil. Even after the sanction, Nord Stream, all of that, they're still importing a lot of Russian oil, but
Right.
they're receiving part of their oil from India and Turkey. It seems that Donald Trump and Europeans are trying to manage something with the case of the Russian oil. How is that possible for Europe today and the difficulties that they're facing? I don't see anybody capable of providing Europe with that much of oil and energy that they need. So,
Nima, the oil markets, I always knew that they were incredibly complex. But in the last year or so, I've had opportunity to look through other people's eyes, some of whom are, most of whom are really competent in what they're talking about. And I've come to understand how fluid the oil markets are in terms of both what I would call rogue oil, like, for example, Glencore and Mark Rich back in the days of Saddam Hussein and the UN Oil for Food program, and in terms of the majors, and a vast array, and I mean that, a vast array of people who play sort of between the majors and between the rogues. And they are people who are in and out of the black market, if you will, the rogues and the majors. And they operate in between, and they keep pipelines going that no one knows are running. I learned of one pipeline that no one knew about for years that was built and pumping a fairly substantial amount of oil, too, in a very critical area of the world. These sorts of things go on, but they seem to be able to coalesce, at least in terms of making sure they turn a profit and the countries that need the energy get the energy. And when I say they turn a profit, it might be like the Kurds, for example, who were pumping out of Kirkuk, and Baghdad didn't like it. And Baghdad put the word out that any majors that dealt with the Kurds would be punished in terms of Baghdad. And since Baghdad's capacity was coming back online and really chasing Saudi Arabia in many respects, and were it absolutely doing what it could do, it would be surpassing Saudi Arabia. That's Iraq. So Baghdad had some sway with the majors. So Baghdad spoke to the majors. And what I mean ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, Total, all those big companies. They quit dealing with the Kurds because they did not want to incur the wrath of Baghdad. Guess who moved in? All these rogue and semi-rogue oil dealers. And what did they do? They went in and said, okay, Brent crude is at this amount. We will discount the oil this amount, and you will have plenty of buyers, and we'll handle it for you. Pipeline, ship, whatever. And they do have access to pipelines. And so the Kurds said, okay, good. Where's it going? Well, it's going to go to Israel. It's going to go to Haifa, but it's going to go through Ceyhan. It's going to be pumped down to Haifa, or it's going to be shipped to the port of Eilat. Not anymore, because that port, the Houthis, closed. But that's the kind of things that go on. So what I'm saying is, you get your oil. If you're Israel, you play this game really well, and you get it at a discounted price, because Israel goes around and shops with the rogues. It shops with the rogues purposefully and gets its oil at a discounted rate and gets it through a convoluted series of ships and pipelines. I said Ceyhan, so you have to say, well, does Ankara know that? You bet they do, because they're getting transshipment fees. So it can go to the devil as far as they're concerned. But this is a very complicated world. And what the SCO did was open up some of the less complicated part of the world in terms of showing people what's planned out there, which is vast and going to change a lot of the energy complexion of the world, especially with regard to China and Russia. But in between that and the real crooks in the world is a vast array of people who operate all the time, sometimes just on the other side of the law, sometimes on the side of the law, sometimes with transponders on, sometimes with transponders off. You know, it's really, but that's what keeps the oil markets going.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today.
Sorry
Great.
it had to be through such a methodology as this, but I have to get my computers fixed.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
it's not my computers. They're fine. It's the AOL. You hear that, audience? AOL. AOL.
Yeah. Great pleasure as always, Larry.
Take care of yourself.
Take care. Bye-bye.
See you.
See you. Bye-bye.
I don't